You wouldn't put a square peg in a round hole, so why would you deploy a traditional firewall in a modern decentralized network? Firewalls have new requirements for businesses leveraging SaaS-based applications and public cloud platforms like AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. We're in the cloud generation now, so your firewalls have to be engineered to fit right in. Reclaim your cloud network. Try a Barracuda Cloud Generation Network or application firewall free at barracuda.com/firewalls.
The Dan Batard Show on ESPN Radio.
That's right. It is the Dan Batard Show with Stugotz on ESPN Radio, the ESPN app, and Sirius XM Channel 80. No Dan, no Stu, no shipping container. Sarah, Spain, and Jason Fitz in for the guys. You can regularly hear Spain and Fitz weeknights 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern. But we're in for the guys today since it's a holiday. ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. You can always shoot us a message on the 1-800-Flowers Twitter feed at ESPN Radio, at Sarah Spain, at Jason Fitz. Probably a lot of messages, Fitz, today about how we're too much sports, where's Stu and Dan, This ruined their day. So let's just get those out of the way.
This is the best thing for me. You know, every time I'm on a news show, it means that I just need to get off Twitter for like 3 days afterwards.
Right.
Because
who's this guy?
Yeah, the world gets to remind me how much they think I suck for about 24 hours. It's great. It's right. Good. It's good.
Right. Well, this should be an interesting endeavor because, as usual, I'm in Chicago, but instead of you being in Bristol, you're in Nashville. Our producer's out, our other producer's in Bristol, and Mikey C's here. So add it all together, and this should be an adventure.
Party.
The good news is we have a ton to talk about because, contrary to what you suggested last week when we were heading into this weekend of football, we had an insane weekend of football. And for those of you who don't usually listen to us, I would say that we're best known for being NFL experts. And if you take a listen, I'm sure you'll understand why.
You've heard all week it's the best weekend in the NFL. And it's not true.
Folds under center, gives it off. Blunt going outside. He's in. Touchdown.
You've got a 1 seed in the NFC in the Eagles that's without their starting quarterback, and I think is going to get thumped.
Ryan rolls. Ryan pumps. Ryan is throwing it up in the air. Incomplete. And the Eagles take over on downs with 58 seconds left.
I'm going Falcons big in this game.
And it's over. It's over. The clock takes away the final seconds, and the Eagles have defeated the Atlanta Falcons 15-10. They are 1 win away from the Super Bowl.
This Steelers team, when they are focused, when they put things together, and they take advantage of the weapons that they have on offense, I absolutely think they're going to win this game.
The give to Fournette, running right up the middle of the field toward the goal line. Touchdown! A 3-yard touchdown run by Leonard Fournette has extended the lead at Heinz Field.
I think that the mental aspect of this game will come in, and that means playoff experience, and that means the aura and vibe that you're getting coming across the field at you from a very, very established Steelers team.
Jacksonville picks it up, takes 2 steps. Keelan Cole takes a knee, and Jacksonville has defeated the Pittsburgh Steelers. Jacksonville is headed to the American Football Conference Championship game.
I think the Saints win this football game, but this is the one I'm the most excited for.
Snap good, spot down, Forbath with plenty of leg, and it is good! Ty Forbath! Yes!
I trust Drew Brees more than I trust Case Keenum, and that's all this comes down to.
Lutz steps into it, and it's good. From 43 yards out and 25 seconds left, the Saints retake the lead.
I don't think the Vikings are going to be able to score a lot of points. I don't love Case Keenum, obviously. I think none of us believe in Case Keenum. Let's say it that way.
Case on a deep drop, steps up in the pocket. He'll fire to the right side, caught by Diggs. Stay up! Oh my God! 30, no 10, touchdown! Are you kidding me? It's the Minneapolis Miracle! Stephon Diggs and the Minnesota Vikings have walked off on the New Orleans Saints.
I think none of us believe in Case Keenum.
Right, so about that.
Hey, at least the good news is there were no Titans clips in there. We were both right on the Titans. What do you know?
Woohoo! Wow, we really went out on a limb, too, by choosing the Patriots over the Titans. But you were right. Sarah Spain, Jason Fitz in for the guys. We didn't get everything right, but I will say the funniest part to me was that you backed yourself into a corner with that Jags pick because you and your old co-host Jordan Rogers were chatting. You decided your hot take was going to be not only will the Jaguars be pretty good this season, but they're going to win more than one playoff game. And after saying that, you decided to be a man of your word, which is not something that this show is usually associated with, and you stuck with it. And by laughing your way through predicting a Jaguars win, you actually were right.
The funny thing is, I haven't heard from Jordan. I mean, Jordan spent all this time railing every week about how bad the Jags are. And, maybe I went a little hot takey, but I specifically told him they would go into Pittsburgh and win when we talked about it. And I haven't heard from him since. I mean, it's better to be lucky than good, Sarah. I always say that. Better to be lucky than good. I was lucky on that one. But I'll take it. Jordan, if you want to, hit a guy up every once in a while, let him know that you were wrong.
Yeah, give us a call, Jordan. We'd love to gloat about him accidentally walking backwards into a correct pick.
Whatever it takes. Whatever it takes.
I think my favorite part actually is that on Friday, as everybody's getting excited for this huge weekend of football and, predicting all these crazy, people were saying that other than the Tennessee New England game, that this was going to be a couple matchups that were probably going to be better than expected and a lot harder to pick. And you were out on your limb out there with this isn't even going to be a good weekend of football. The Eagles aren't going to be able to compete. Steelers are going to win, or, you said the Steelers are going to win and then you backed your way into the Jaguars pick. And then we both were wrong about the Saints, although that really could have gone either way.
I mean, at the end of the day, I think the surprising thing to me was how close the games were. The Jags-Steelers gave us a great game, obviously. You just mentioned the Saints. I mean, anybody that wants to come at me, I always say to this, you tell me, all of you out there that had a year's salary, would you bet on Case Keenum making the winning throw or Drew Brees? I mean, we weren't using any fantastic logic there. I mean, you look at that play at the end, and I keep looking at it, keep trying to figure out how that happened. It's great for Minnesota, fantastic for Case Keenum, but I still can't figure it out.
Well, I mean, I think the thing is that what we're seeing is a bunch of newer teams that are not the playoff perennial favorites, and it's really hard to disengage from a narrative that you're used to. Even understanding that some of the teams that we're used to seeing, like the Seahawks, didn't make it, even understanding that there will be a replacement of the old guard at some point, and some of these guys are aging, it's still difficult, like you said, to look at a matchup of a Drew Brees and Case Keenum and decide that we think that this guy who wasn't even supposed to be the starter this year is going to lead his team. But the Vikings are such a well-rounded team, and our tendency to look at just the quarterback, and not just us, a lot of people in football, can kind of blind you to everything else going on.
Well, and how much of this all comes back to the quarterback conversation? Because realistically, I've made fun of all year the defense wins championships, because I'm not sure that's necessarily true in the NFL anymore. And then what do we see over the weekend? The better defense in these games managed to come out and somehow even a 45-42 game that was a bit of an aberration, that was still the Jags defense made that win happen, which is sort of alarming. You look at each of these across the board, and I think I fell so in love with the narrative and conversation about quarterback that it's easy just to forget that there is an entire other side of the field. Absolutely.
Well, and we were talking a lot about experience on Friday, and the stat that stood out to us was how lopsided these quarterback playoff starts were heading in. The only quarterback who had more playoff starts by a significant amount who came out on top was Tom Brady. Ben Roethlisberger's 20 playoff starts to Blake Bortles 1, didn't matter. Matt Ryan's 9 to Nick Foles 1, didn't matter. Drew Brees 12 to Case Keenum's none, didn't matter. And I was kind of joking because Adam Schefter tweeted out the final four quarterbacks, and you're looking Foles, Keenum, Bortles, Brady, and I jokingly said it's a quarterback's league, folks. And people thought I was serious, and my point was, yeah, it is a huge deal, but some of the best quarterbacks in the NFL were sitting at home for the postseason, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, because you got to surround them with enough talent. And you're right about the defense and the other parts of the team being overlooked far too often, and we're seeing now the results of that.
I think the biggest example where I just had my head up my rear end had to be the Eagles. I mean, the Eagles as a team, did they look good as an offense? No, not particularly, but as a team, they look just so impressive. And I sat there the whole time thinking, every time the Falcons got the ball, I was like, well, this is the drive where it's just going to, they're going to pick up, they're going to get a little momentum, and it's going to be fine. And then I kept watching and thinking, nope, Nope. It was amazing to watch the Eagles, who I felt like each of these games had their own momentum swings, but there were clear-cut teams that were playing harder, faster, and to that degree better, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And I look at that game, the Eagles did that. I look at the Jags, they did that. And the Patriots obviously did that. And frankly, Minnesota looked like they were taking it to New Orleans a lot. Like the more aggressive team felt like it won each of those games.
Well, it was an amazing weekend of football, despite your dire prediction.
Yes.
And we have tons more to get to.
Don't forget, you can hear more of my sons Dan and Stu weekdays starting at 10 Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPNU.
The guys are out today for the holidays, so Sarah Spain and Jason Fitz with you. You can regularly hear us weeknights 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern, Spain and Fitz. Big weekend of football, and Fitz, we were wrong on a couple things. We got a couple things right, but to me, I think the continuing saga and tale of Blake Bortles giving the figurative middle finger to everybody else in the league continues to be incredibly entertaining. And we'll get to that and him talking back to some of his haters. You'll see whether he took the high road or the significantly lower road in a minute. But the breaking news today is that the Titans are saying goodbye to head coach Mike Mularkey. And you are a Nashville guy. This was your team. You picked against him, as did I, in the opening round. We both were surprised that they advanced. And then the inevitable meeting of the buzzsaw that is the Patriots ended their season. Usually when a coach is in the divisional round of the playoffs, that's a pretty good sign that they're going to be safe. Not the case for Mularkey. Fitz, what do you make of this decision by the Titans?
And to that point, Sarah, first time since 2008 they've made the playoffs, so it's a franchise trending in the right direction. The decision doesn't really surprise me. Amy Adams-Strunk, who's the majority owner for the Titans, came out in the statement that they made, said, we did in fact discuss extending his future with our team over the past week, but in those discussions about the direction of the team, it became evident that we saw different paths to achieve greater success. So the quick translation for me, after spending a year and a half covering the team in Nashville, is that this came down to offense, because Mularkey is a very loyal person that has a very set way he wants to run his offense. Terry Robisky's the offensive coordinator. At the end of the day, Marcus Mariota has not continued to develop, and there's been just this rising swell of they've got to get somebody in that can be a quarterback whisperer if they're going to make the most out of Mariota. So I think it's going to be an interesting moment and an interesting hire for the franchise, because they've got a quarterback that they've got to figure out if he's worth mega bucks. He's going to come up for that contract soon. So just keep an eye out. Everybody knows John Robinson's the GM for the Titans. He came from the Patriots tree, so people around Nashville for a long time have thought that John Robinson has his eye on Josh McDaniels. So you could see another team in the Josh McDaniels hunt.
You mentioned Mariota. His worst NFL regular season in year 3, when a lot of people expected him to take that next big step. Career low 13 touchdowns, career high 15 interceptions. But we did see a really nice effort from him in that opening playoff game, not only passing touchdowns to himself, which was remarkable, but using his legs, making good on plays that fell apart, and making some crazy good blocks, plays off the ball that helped his team. I think that probably ingratiates him to his teammates. The question is, how can you get that consistency in a regular season? And if you don't think that Mularkey was the guy getting that out of him, was there an opportunity to keep him as head coach and then bring in a quarterbacks coach or offensive coordinator who would be better suited? Because a lot of times I think people equate the idea of having a head coach who's offensively minded with being a quarterback savior, when it doesn't need to be the head coach in that position. It could be that somebody else on the staff is the one tasked with making that work.
Well, and I think when the Titans in their statement say it became evident we saw different paths to achieve greater success, that's, to me, says we told him to get a new offensive staff. And,
right.
And Mike, that just isn't the way Mike works. Also, when we talked earlier about our terrible predictions, one thing we did get right on the Titans game, I said it going in, is the fact is Mariota was going to have to use his feet to get a win, which also meant he was going to have to stay healthy. They reported after the game he strained his hamstring in the first quarter, and they had to change their offense because of it, which is why this thing got out of hand quickly. The only shot they had was using Mariota's leg. So it'll be interesting to see, because he does have the label, air quotes, of injury prone. So whoever comes in, are they going to still let him use his feet, or are they going to try and get him in the pocket so he's not hurt every year?
Absolutely. The Titans were 3-13 in 2015, 9-7 in 2016, 9-7 this year, which, even though they managed to beat the Chiefs in the wild card round, was a disappointment. The fact that they had back-to-back winning seasons after really struggling, I think bodes well for Mularkey if he goes out and looks for another job. But Mariota's decline doesn't help him.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And this is now the second time Mularkey's been fired because he was the coach in Buffalo and just didn't get it done there too. So you have to wonder what the future looks like. More importantly, with all of the hiring coming in right now, we've heard all the rumors, Matt Patricia possibly to the Lions and, Josh McDaniels to every team. It'll be interesting to see how quickly they can comply with whatever they need to comply on Rooney Rule. And then they can also get to the chance to talk to coaches they want to talk to, because if it's a Patriots coach they want to talk to, they have to wait till that season's done.
Mm-hmm. Which is a risk, because then, you can lose out on other opportunities, other coaches that are out there. With the Patriots, usually you would be looking at a team preparing for a big postseason game and say, how are they going to deal with the talk about Matt Patricia going to the Lions and Josh McDaniels going to the Titans and the story from Seth Wickersham and everything else. And instead, it's more like, they'll be fine. Like, we don't even worry about the Patriots when it comes to stuff like that. And this year, it's interesting because in that Seth Wickersham story, he talked about how Belichick, for the first time, really seems to be invested in growing the coaches below him and working with them on finding them another job and being okay with that instead of resisting it.
It's going to be interesting to see how that changes their success next, right? I mean, it's kind of crazy. We just presume that the Patriots are going to win no matter what, but they do have two coaches that are out there interviewing for jobs, figuring out what they would build in a staff. I mean, it's a really complicated thing. It's almost like Alabama in the college ranks and New England in the professional ranks can just handle whatever's thrown at them. Everybody else, it's an excuse for why they lose.
Don't forget, you can hear more of my sons Dan and Stu weekdays starting at 10 Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPNU.
Winning at sports and at sports broadcasting means changing things up.
Just like La Quinta Inns and Suites is changing up their look.
A renovated lobby that's so contemporary it even makes Goluk look cool.
Yes, it does. And a totally updated fitness center that even has Wingo feeling like a workout.
I'm ripped. Plus plenty of comfortable spaces to hang out.
Yep, this La Quinta look definitely has a vibe of victory.
So you can just relax, refresh, and get ready for your next big meeting.
Prepare to win at business with La Quinta Inns and Suites.
Book now at LQ.com.
Former All-Pro Jaguars lineman, current radio analyst for the team, Tony Boselli. Don't have to deal with Dan and Stugotz today, so that's a good way to start your Monday, Tony.
Sarah, why do you think I said yes so quickly to this interview?
Exactly. So the first ever draft pick for the Jaguars gets to watch them get a surprising win behind the arm of one Blake Bortles, who your buddy Chris Sims said was the 70th best quarterback in the NFL. I just want to see if you have any thoughts for Chris Sims this morning. I know you said the most impressive thing he's ever done is almost die on the field. Do you have a follow-up?
Well, I think, I will wait for my overall comments to the next time I get have an opportunity to talk directly to Chris Sims on the radio. But I think big picture, it's ridiculous. Not only some of the things Chris has said, but the overall commentary about Blake Bortles. I'm not saying he's great. I'm not saying he's Tom Brady by any means. But if you go look at the numbers this year, he's not terrible. I mean, he's not like he's awful. There's a lot of quarterbacks that start in this league that are much worse. And the bottom line is he's on a team that scored 45 points in the playoffs to take them to the AFC Championship, and he was a major part of that. So Blake is, it was so bad for him last year, and it was so ugly at times that I think the perception is that there's just no hope for Blake Bortles, and that's just not the case.
So, Tony, even after the win, part of the conversation seems to be, well, the Steelers were looking past the Jags. Are we just all losing sight of the fact that maybe the Jags are just that stinking good?
They're a good football team. I mean, by the way, the Steelers should really shut up, and anyone who talks about the Jaguar-Steeler matchup should, okay, I don't care what happened as far as looking ahead and all this nonsense. They beat them 30-9 and 45-42. Twice this year they beat them. They scored 75 points on them. The Steelers got beat. I mean, let's stop trying to justify why the Jaguars are in the AFC Championship. They're one of the best teams in the NFL. And now they got an opportunity to go to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, you mentioned Bortles not being great, but also not getting enough credit. Fitz and I, over the last couple weeks, have sort of been trying to pinpoint what exactly it is about Bortles that makes other teams, players, broadcasters, pundits, so free and willing to crush him. I mean, there's been worse quarterbacks in the league. There's been more hateable quarterbacks in the league. What is it about Bortles that makes everybody want to jump on this bandwagon where they feel good publicly trashing him?
I think it's a couple things, and by the way, I'm fine with the media that doing that's, I guess, and I'm partly in the media nowadays, is that's the job. I mean, people say things and people are trying to get clicks and mentions and all this other stuff, whatever. I'm fine. Actually, the media makes me laugh half the time. But it's shocking to me that peers of his have the freedom or feel like they have the freedom to just take shots at a guy that, number one, just beat them. And number two is one of the guys that's in the league with him. I never saw that before when I play. I mean, I think that's fairly new, of taking the unwarranted shots that they have. And I think part of it is due, media-wise, Jacksonville is an easy target. It has been for a long time. It's an easy target to take shots at. The fan base has been ridiculed. The organization has been ridiculed for years. And now some of it rightfully so in the sense of this team hasn't won in a long time. And then Blake Bortles on top is kind of just part of that. He had a bad year. And the other thing with Blake is, last year he had a bad year. He actually played pretty well this year. The other thing with Blake is when it's bad, it's really, really ugly. Mm-hmm. Like some of the throws are really ugly and his mechanics get really off. And so that I think sometimes maybe just people see them and they're like, oh my gosh, I've never seen a guy throw it that bad at times. And there's some truth to that because Blake's mechanics at times can get really, really awful. And some throws we even in the booth say, oh my gosh, where'd that come from? But the flip side of it is there when he plays what he is a competitor. And if anyone was ever around him and you were a team with him, you'd love him because he's one of the toughest guys, never blames anybody, takes it all on himself. And finds ways to win games with his legs, and he'll make big throws when you need him to at times. But it's a little much, especially his peers taking shots like they have, in my opinion.
We're talking to Tony Boselli joining us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Tony, if Blake goes out and wins it, if they get themselves to a Super Bowl in this process, what's it mean for the long-term contract status for him with the Jags?
It's a great question because, I love Blake. I'm glad he's on our team. I still would, if I was in charge, I would just say, listen, you're going to play out your fifth-year rookie deal. Now, he's going to make $19 million. I don't think anyone's going to feel sorry for him. But regardless, you could win the Super Bowl and he could be MVP. I'm not signing him to a long-term deal because I want to see him do it multiple. I'm taking all the emotion out of it, which unfortunately GMs don't do. That's why Belichick, by the way, is the best. He takes all emotion out of every decision he makes. And if you take the emotion out of it, I would say, Blake, we'll pay you $19 million next year, but you have to do it again before we give you a long-term deal.
So, Tony, Blake Bortles, as we mentioned, wasn't blowing anyone away with his stats, but they did enough offensively to make up for what was actually a poor performance from their D. Ben Roethlisberger threw for 469 yards, a franchise record 5 touchdowns, and he was intercepted and he had a fumble return for a score. So the defense did their part at times, but when you look ahead to the next game, they're going to need a much better performance from the defense to make up for the fact that Bortles isn't a Ben Roethlisberger or a Tom Brady. What do you expect from the next game?
Yeah, I think, Sarah, the defense is what's carried this team. And so yesterday they were not very good. Now, some of the plays that Antonio Brown made and the throws, Ben, at some point, and I tell people all the time, you have to tip your cap to the other guy. You have possibly 3 Hall of Famers, and Le'Veon Bell, Ben Roethlisberger, and Antonio Brown playing all together. And very good. They have 3 Pro Bowlers on the offensive line. And so it's not like that's a bad group. But I think coming into New England, I think it's going to be a scrappy game. I think the defense will play much better. In the NFL, every game's different. Last week, literally, the Jaguars scored 10 points against the Buffalo Bills. And barely got 10. And all of a sudden, they scored 45 against Pittsburgh. So who knows what's going to happen this coming weekend. But bottom line is defense is going to have to really, really clean it up a little bit and make some plays because it's a very good, they got Hall of Fame players, Brady and Gronk, and they're going to have to figure out a way to turn them over. And they did it against Pittsburgh. They got to get a couple turnovers, create some short fields for the offense. And if they're going to win, it's going to be a 3-point, it's going to be a tight game, and that's how it is. But the defense is so talented. They can go up there and win. I mean, they're not the favorite by any means, and as much as I love them, you got to create some scenarios in your, to figure out how they win the football game. But they're talented enough, and that defense flies around, and who knows what'll happen. Pick off Brady, pick off Fumble like they did against Pittsburgh, and next thing you know, you're in the Super Bowl.
Tony, have you guys gotten any indication on Leonard Fournette and his health, where he stands going into next week?
He's been beat up the whole year. I mean, he really has. The last 10 weeks, he's not been healthy. The ankle bothered him. He's a quad. He came back and made, had some nice runs. I don't think he had the same explosiveness he did to start the game. He'll be fine. It's the AFC Championship game. Figure out a way. Take whatever medicine you have to. I'm not saying that's what he's going to do, but that's what I would do. Where's the magic, medicine that makes everything go away for 4 hours, because that's what I'm going to take. My goodness, how you can trust me, if somebody played and got hurt, you never know when it's over, and I've played in the AFC Championship game, you don't know if you're ever going to get another chance. So you better go do whatever you have to do to play that football game.
The magic medicine, that's a good way of putting it. We'll stick with that terminology. Thanks so much for some of your time, Tony. Really appreciate it. Enjoy the game this weekend.
All right, guys. Enjoy the Batard show today. Keep the seats warm.
Thanks, Tony.
Don't forget, you can hear more of my sons Dan and Stu weekdays starting at 10 Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPNU.
Hi, everyone. Stugotz here. Support for the Dan Le Batard Show podcast comes from our friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Chances are you're confident when it comes to your work, your hobbies, and your life. Rocket Mortgage gives you that same level of confidence when it comes to buying a home or refinancing your existing home loan. With Rocket Mortgage, you can apply simply and understand fully so you can mortgage confidently. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/Stugotz, STUGOTZ, equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states, NMLS consumeraccess.org number 3030.
Mike Mularkey fired by Tennessee. Let's go to the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line and chat with Tim Hasselbeck. Let's start there, Tim. Are you surprised? This is a team that is not a perennial playoff participant. They get to the divisional round and their coach is out. What do you think inspired the decision?
Well, I think what inspired the decision was that it was heading this direction, throughout the regular season. And then, they kind of sneak their way into the postseason. And then they come away with a win. And I think, ownership was, kind of in an interesting spot because Mike Mularkey kind of brought to everybody's attention, kind of the rumors swirling around his job security. And it basically took that for, ownership to come out and kind of give him a vote of confidence. And then you follow that up with, a playoff game against the New England Patriots where they just looked overmatched. They seemed like they were, pretty far away from being a true competitor in that football game. And so, I think that it was probably trending in this direction all along, with the exception of 1 week coming off a wild card victory.
So, Tim, if you're a head coach and you're looking at the Titans and you see Marcus Mariota, do you see an elite quarterback there?
No, I don't think Marcus is elite right now, but I think that if you're a coach looking at that job, you look at Marcus as a positive to that job. I don't think that there would be people that look at that job and say, I don't want that because I'm stuck with him. I think plenty of people believed when he was coming out and still believe that he can be a top-tier starter. He's not there now. There's obviously things that he can do better than many because of his just athletic ability and ability to kind of make plays. But as a passer inside the pocket, he needs to develop him. And I think one of the reasons he hasn't, the way that some other younger quarterbacks have, is in large part because of the offense that he's played in. And I have to think that has to be, part of the decision to part ways with Mularkey and really his offense coordinator, Terry Robisky.
Talking to Tim Hasselbeck, what do you make of that play at the end of that incredible Saints-Vikings games? Marcus Williams, everyone's trying to figure out, was he trying to avoid a PI? Did he think the ball was going to be shorter and going to the other receiver in the vicinity? Did he just plain whiff? How do you see that play?
Well, the way I see the play is as good of an offensive play as it was, and it's I don't want to take credit away from the Vikings. It's a worse defensive play. I mean, it really is it's not this, amazing, catch by Stephon Diggs. It's really a whiff by Marcus Williams, as you said. What is he doing? I guess only he could answer that question. I mean, he looks like he closes his eyes and ducks his head. I don't know. Maybe he's afraid of a 15-yard penalty in that spot, which would obviously, have put the Vikings in a situation to kick a game-winning field goal. But, it's kind of an inexcusable play. And, everybody is blaming Marcus Williams, and I understand. But Ken Crawley, who's the underneath defender, he doesn't help Marcus Williams out much either because he's playing so shallow. So it's just kind of one of those plays that you practice it all the time throughout, the season. You kind of call them your last four. You probably have a group of four of those that you try to get to, and they rarely, if ever, work. And it's just kind of remarkable to see one work in that situation.
We're talking to Tim Hasselbeck, ESPN NFL analyst on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. So, Tim, Case Keenum through the pass, obviously, and he continues to move on in the playoffs. What is his future with the Vikings at this point?
I think they have to franchise him. I don't know how you kind of just close the door on him. Let's say, for example, you could get Kirk Cousins. Okay, let's say that was going to be, your response to fill the position if Case Keenum walks. You've got to pay and probably guarantee Kirk, 3 times that. So, franchising Case is probably your best option because you're going to pay him, under $25 million on a 1-year deal. You basically do what, the Redskins have done to Cousins and say, hey, it was great, but let's do it another season. It's a massive raise for him. He's not going to hold out. And so I think that's your best scenario in terms of attacking the position. And I also think they end up re-signing Teddy Bridgewater. I think they let him see what's out there in free agency, and then they signed Teddy Bridgewater to a backup deal.
So you think Case Keenum's the starter next year?
Yeah, listen, based on what he's achieved this year and the fact that, Minnesota has to have an answer at the position, Case Keenum for 1 year on the franchise tag, I believe, is the best that they're going to be able to do.
Good stuff. Tim Hasselbeck, ESPN NFL analyst on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Looking ahead a little bit, we've been talking about how the reason that the Jacksonville Jaguars beat the Steelers was so much because the Steelers were looking ahead. But this is the second time they've beaten them. They put 75 points on them in their 2 meetings. Are we maybe underestimating that this Jaguars team is good enough to beat a team even if they aren't overlooking them?
Yeah, I think it's a great point by you. I mean, the truth is, we all kind of fall into it. I'm guilty of it. We favor offenses so much more than we favor defenses. We do. It's just kind of the nature of, how we cover pro football on TV. And so when a team's defense is significantly better than its offense, I don't think that we group them in the same caliber, as we do other teams. And there's a reason for it. Blake Bortles has had stretches where he's looked like the guy that we'd seen, leading up to the season. But I think one of the reasons that you do have to take them seriously is that their defense, it's undeniable how good they are. From a personnel and scheme standpoint, they're tremendous. And, when you look at them offensively, because they've been able to run the football a bit, and Bortles has had stretches where he's actually been really good. Because he's had those stretches, I think that it does make them, a legitimate threat, and it does make them a team that, has the ability to go in, to Pittsburgh and really kind of embarrass them. So if you look at weeks 13 to 15 for Blake Bortles, he was awesome. And then if you look at, really kind of the end of that game yesterday against the Steelers, he was outstanding there too. I think we're holding against him, some of the kind of past sins of his career.
That being said, Tim, if you're looking at a Super Bowl that's Case Keenum versus Blake Bortles, are you jumping up and down with excitement, or are you sort of rolling your eyes?
Well, hey, listen, as a guy that achieved less in his playing career than both of those guys, I'm happy for him. I'm glad to see him. Are you kidding me? Good for those guys. Look, I kind of feel like, Case Keenum's got a little bit of a, almost a Kurt Warner story to him. So I'd be excited to see Case Look, Blake Bortles, it's obviously, he's not playing the position the way other guys are. Certainly not even Bortles and obviously not Tom Brady. So I'd be excited to see Brady and Keenum in the Super Bowl. But I do think that the Jacksonville Jaguars have the ability to make it a tight game because of their defensive personnel. It's just a matter of if Bortles can avoid the bad mistakes, against the, an always disciplined Patriots team.
Tim, before we let you go, just a personal opinion. We've been talking about 8 new teams in the playoffs this year. Some of the narratives that we're used to, some of the teams that we're used to seeing go far, not making it. Are you a fan of seeing some of these kind of surprising teams advance, or are you of the opinion that some have that, this is kind of disappointing, I don't want to watch teams with quarterbacks that are sort of subpar?
Yeah, you know what? I like this. I truly think this. I think Case Keenum has had an MVP type year, but he's not Drew Brees, and so, I think the casual fan probably does look at it and go, well, this isn't as much fun. I mean, it'd be so much better to have Drew Brees in this. I mean, the guy's a Hall of Famer. And look, that's fair, but look, Case Keenum played every bit as good as Drew Brees did yesterday. I think he deserves it. So, I think Bortles is the outlier, and obviously it's interesting, because you have an injury situation for Carson Wentz, so that's why, Foles is in the mix here, and so you never want to see that. But look, I think there are more than 4 good quarterbacks in the NFL, and if it's always the same 4 guys, then I don't know that that's much fun either.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, thanks for making time for us, Tim. Really appreciate it.
All right, see you guys.
Thanks, Tim.
Don't forget, you can hear more of my sons Dan and Stu weekdays starting at 10 Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPNU.
Hey there, I'm a glue stick, so I have one job. I glue kid stuff. So sorry for being jealous of Geico, who does a ton more. Like give you 24/7 access to thousands of licensed agents. And Geico has been around for over 75 years and has a 97% customer satisfaction rating. While I've just got mediocre adhesive skills, Geico also has an award-winning mobile app. Uh-oh, arts and crafts time. No eating the glue stick. Miss Lydia!
Geico. Expect great savings and a whole lot more.